Thank you for joining me today, everyone. My name is Trevor Cockburn, and today my presentation will be on the benefits of augmented reality, specifically the augmented reality sandbox in the classroom. In this presentation, we'll be going over what is augmented reality, what is the historical background of augmented reality, where does augmented reality come from, and where is it today? How is augmented reality used in the classroom? We'll be going over some just general tools that are often used and found in the classroom. What are the benefits of augmented reality? How are students benefited through the use of augmented reality? What educational benefits does it allow? And lastly, we'll be talking on the augmented reality sandbox and how the augmented reality sandbox can improve learning through the other areas that we talked about in the previous section. So, what is augmented reality? Well, I included a quote from Tim Cook that says, "I am excited about augmented reality because unlike virtual reality, which closes the world out, AR allows individuals to be present in the world, but hopefully allows an improvement on what's happening around them." This quote really provides a great overview of what augmented reality is. It doesn't take away anything. It enhances things. It adds another level to what it is. Whether or not it's just the world around you, or whether or not adding a level to education. So, to understand what augmented reality is, we must understand where it comes from. We must understand what historical information and what historical background does augmented reality have. So, in this section we'll be going over different key points and dates and time that augmented reality really hit a milestone. First, in 1968, Ivan Sutherland, a computer scientist, created what is considered the first head-mounted display system. With the help of his students, Ivan Sutherland began working on his head-mounted display system in the early 1960s. By the end of the decade, the device was fully functional. The device had a large mechanical arm attachment that would be suspended above the users, following them around the room, and the device displayed very simplistic wireframe rooms, but would adjust the perspective of the image based on the user's focal point. This was the very first example of augmented reality, specifically the augmented reality head-mounted display system that supported head tracking. Although very, very simplistic, this device was the first of its kind and paved the way for future augmented reality technologies. Next, in 1990, Tom Caudell and Dave Mazel, two researchers from Boeing, came up with the name augmented reality when implementing a heads-up display system, HUD, using it as a tool for visualizing complicated schematic diagrams. They began working on this device when they were asked to create a replacement for the current system that Boeing used, which at that time was just large boards with wiring instructions for each of the aircrafts. Instead, they both came up with the idea of superimposing the position of the cables through glasses and projected them onto a board. This ultimately would lead to the reduction of having boards for each of the different aircrafts, and instead the workers could wear the wiring instructions and project them onto reusable boards. Next, in 1992, Louis Rosenberg created the first functional augmented reality system that was used to train and enhance operator performance in the U.S. Air Force. Rosenberg's study confirms that overlaying abstract information in the form of virtual fixtures on top of sensory feedback from a remote environment can greatly enhance performance in telemanipulation tasks. Virtual fixtures consisted of two robots that were controlled by an exoskeleton suit on the upper body of the users. Additionally, a headset was provided to assist with the user's view of robotic arms versus the actual location of the robot arms. Next, in the early 2000s, was a significant rise in mobile application. specifically for mobile cell phones. In the early 2000s, there was a debut of many different augmented reality apps designed for smartphones. AR Tennis was released in 2005 for the Nokia phone and is considered to be one of the first examples of augmented reality game on a smartphone. As more smartphones were released over the years, augmented reality applications are now common and often seen as a popular educational tool. And lastly, was the release of Apple's iPad. In 2010, Apple released their iPad, and it quickly became adopted by many, many schools because of its cheap ability to support and be a learning tool. So that's a little bit of its historical background. Now we know where it came from and what milestones really impacted it. Now we can see how it's used in the classroom. We're going to briefly just touch on some different applications where it's used. Augmented reality tours. You can often see in history classes or science classes. You can actually see a tour of a certain place. Next is augmented reality books. Books that have augmented reality features. You take a mobile device or a tablet as you're reading a book, and a 3D shape will appear, giving you additional information. 3D models. We often see this used in 3D models significantly a lot. You have anatomy classes that often use it. As you point a mobile device or a tablet, it will give you a breakdown of different body parts, etc. There's also a science tool that allows you to look at different planets or things like the moon, and you can rotate it around, and you can see the different key points on that planet, and really be able to learn some information about it. Also 4D augmented reality. Then we also have augmented reality glasses and the augmented reality sandbox, which we will touch on later in this presentation. So these are some uses of augmented reality in the classroom. But how does augmented reality benefit learning? How are students' lives improved? How are their educational experience improved through augmented reality? Well, we find that augmented reality improves 3 sections. Content understanding, memory retention, and lastly, motivation, collaboration, and interactivity. So, for content understanding, one study, the authors conducted an experiment using an augmented reality book-based educational tool called Live Solar System, LSS. The authors write that, quote, LSS allows students to explore freely in the AR solar system so that they can understand in a more concrete manner the 8 planets in our solar system. The results showed that students who used AR to learn characteristics about the solar system improved their pretest scores by 46%, while those using the textbooks only improved their pretest scores by 17%. Another study, while using the AR system that teaches Chinese students the meaning of word pictograms, the students' memory and reading and writing scores improved more when using the AR system compared to learning from traditional textbooks. The last study is another study that tested the effects of AR when teaching 9 through 12-year-old students about volcanoes using the AR-based applications that blended visual and hands-on instruction. Students using AR applications displayed greater improvements to their pretest scores than those who did not use AR applications, thus suggesting that students learn significantly better while using augmented reality than without. So this is just a few examples of how augmented reality greatly improves content understanding. Students can actually walk away with more information about what they're learning. So the next area that we're going to go into is memory retention. In a series of studies, while using AR, videos, and textbooks, students were required to learn the components of an aircraft turbine engine. The research showed that students displayed better short-term and long-term memory of the components themselves. While they were using augmented reality to visually see these different components, they were able to get a better grasp and walk away with the information processed into their long-term memory. The next example is a study that compared augmented reality and virtual reality participants using an augmented reality and virtual reality. Participants using augmented reality had higher test scores on auditory information retention when learning about the solar system. In the same study, the authors go on to claim that augmented reality be more effective because it frees up attention, cognitive resources otherwise dedicated to visual channels, allowing the auditory information to be processed more thoroughly. This is a perfect example as we go back to what Tim Cook said from the quote that I provided earlier in the presentation. Augmented reality doesn't close down. Augmented reality simply opens. It adds another level of depth. It adds another level of depth to education. Whereas virtual reality, as great as it is, and there's many applications for it, it often will close down senses for students. It often restricts the students to focus on what they just see. Lastly, in an article published in June of 2020, the authors conducted an experiment that investigated the effects of mobile augmented reality, MAR, has on the retention of knowledge and information. This study compared to the results of participants disassembling a PlayStation 3 using a paper manual versus those using an augmented reality MAR headset. The authors concluded that the results showed an improvement in knowledge retention for the participants using the developed MAR system compared to the participants using the conventional method, paper method. It is suggested that the results of the study may be credited to the benefits of stereoscopic vision, which bestowed, quote, better depth judgment and spatial relationship of the different components in the PlayStation 3 console to the users. Additionally, the results indicate that animations, visual, and 3D models seem to help stimulate motivation in the learners and, quote, encouraging them to pay closer attention to the training process. This study can also be linked to various other instructional hands-on activities that can be found in many schools and other educational settings. Lastly, motivation, collaboration, and interactivity. One article that surveyed several papers, the author claimed that AR experiences have been shown to cause improvements in group collaboration. Another article had a study in which two groups of students were to navigate a neighborhood. One group using a digital map, a traditional map. The other group of students were using an augmented reality map. The students using the AR map were determined to be more efficient and successful in using the AR map, as well as creating an atmosphere that welcomed collaboration. The students using the AR map were found to be more engaged and more motivated to, one, reach the goal and to learn and to navigate the neighborhood, and two, to work with one another, to be more engaged with one another in the topic that they're learning. Lastly, in an article titled Augmented Reality in the Classroom, the authors conducted that results of various studies showed that various mobile AR applications proved to, quote, motivate students to explore their surroundings and collaboratively develop their problem-solving skills. The authors go on to explain that augmented reality's high level of interactivity enhances learning, especially for students who learn best visually and with non-text-based learning. So these are just some benefits of augmented reality. These are ways that augmented reality does benefit learning through content understanding, memory retention, motivation, collaboration, and interactivity. So next, what is the augmented reality sandbox? I've mentioned it before, and we're going to go into it now. But what is the augmented reality? Well, augmented reality is a tool that is used to teach students in topics of geography, geology, topography, watersheds. So, what is it? Well, this is what it is. This is how it looks like. The augmented reality sandbox is literally a sandbox. It has 4 major components to it. First is the camera. The augmented reality sandbox that I built is using a Microsoft Kinect. Microsoft released a Kinect for their Xbox 360 a few years back. And it was used for motion gaming. You can play sports, tennis, etc. Very similar to the Wii, except without a remote. Well, we're not using it to read motion, we're using it to read depth. What is the depth between this point from where the camera is to this point in the stand? Where the camera is to that point in the stand, and to that point, etc., etc. Next component is the projector. The projector is taking an image that is created from the computer and spinning it out into the sand. Next is the sandbox with sand. In this case, I'm using kinetic sand. As you mold the sand, it builds up and it piles up. And it holds its shape. And lastly is the computer. So, as I said earlier, as the camera takes that information, it sends it to the computer. The computer processes that information and turns it into a map, topography map. It takes that map and spits it out through the projector and onto the sand. So as the students are manipulating the sand, piling things up, changing it, it's changing in real time. So, all of these same concepts that were discussed earlier regarding AR can be translated to the augmented reality sandbox. Content understanding, memory retention, and student collaboration are all benefits of the augmented reality sandbox. Because of the hands-on and tactile nature of the sandbox, students feel far more engaged than those who aren't using the sandbox. With this increase of motivation, collaboration, and interactivity, it also has an increase of content understanding and memory retention. One study in which the augmented reality sandboxes were used in an entry-level geology course. By the end of the semester, students responded to exit surveys. The results of the exit surveys showed that 97% of students had a positive response to the use of the sandbox. Out of these students, 80% claimed that they had learned something from the augmented reality sandbox that they can use in their everyday lives. In the same class, many students stated that they enjoyed the augmented reality sandbox's exercises far more than traditional topographic map exercises. Many students use the word fun to explain it. Next, in an article, they state that because its ability to merge scientific content, practice, and knowledge development, the augmented reality sandbox can be an important tool for helping students understand how scientists create models that explain Earth systems. This will also allow for students to begin developing important model building skills themselves. Developing these spatial skills. Because of its visual and tactile nature, it is strongly suggested that the augmented reality sandbox would be the perfect tool to teach introductory ideas and concepts in geology, geography, topography, and other spatial concepts. Because of the ability for augmented reality to allow for better auditory retention, the augmented reality sandbox may be a useful tool when teaching these topics listed above. Through the use of the augmented reality sandbox, students will show higher levels of memory retention, motivation, and collaboration. So the augmented reality sandbox is a great tool, specifically for the elementary to middle school level age group. Teaching these entry-level topics in geology, geography, being able to help the students understand in a way that improves and encourages and stimulates motivation, collaboration, which in turn helps them with content understanding and memory retention. The augmented reality sandbox is a perfect tool to be used in the classroom. Thank you for joining in to my presentation today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I implore that you explore augmented reality in all aspects of your lives. Thank you, and take care.